You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Judge drops hammer on Trump admin. You're violating my order. Based on an article by Matthew Rosa. Court orders are not suggestions. Power is still the point. The central fact in this story is not confusion inside the Bureau of Prisons. It is power. The Trump administration issued the anti-trans executive order, and the federal prison system carried it out. Transgender women in federal custody did not create this problem. The state did, then tried to rename the damage as policy compliance. A Reagan-appointed federal judge, Royce Lamberth, saw the pattern clearly enough to say the government was violating his order on its face. That is the real conflict here. Not a technical disagreement over prison housing, but an executive branch willing to test how much cruelty it can impose before a court stops it. The misdirection is the method. The administration's defense is a familiar bureaucratic dodge. It claims the order barred transfer to men's prisons, but did not require transgender women to be housed with cisgender women or given the same privileges as everyone else. That is not careful legal reasoning. It is a loophole hunt designed to preserve the punishment while pretending to honor the ruling. This is how state power disguises itself when it is caught. It does not always say no. It says yes, but in a way that strips the target of meaningful rights, then calls the result compliance. The quasi-solitary unit is not a neutral administrative solution. It is punishment by another name, cruelty by segregation. The source describes what that means in practice. Less recreation, less work, less programming, worse conditions, declining mental health, and worsening gender dysphoria. That is not custody. That is isolation inflicted on a politically targeted population after a court tried to block one version of the abuse. The government's move from one prohibited form of confinement to a more punitive segregated unit tells you everything about its intent. The goal was not simply to avoid violating the judge's order. The goal was to continue degrading transgender women while trying to stay just inside the language of legality. That is institutional cowardice, and it is deliberate. The courts are being used as terrain. Lamberth's frustration matters because it exposes a deeper problem. The administration is not merely losing in court, it is probing how much court resistance can be converted into administrative delay and harm. A ruling against transfer did not end the policy, it changed the venue of the abuse. The separate taxes order makes the pattern even uglier. One federal judge barred housing inmates biologically male in the general population where female inmates are present, and the Bureau of Prisons appears to have used that as a pretext to funnel transgender women into a restrictive unit with fewer rights. The result is not judicial clarity. It is a machine that can exploit conflicting orders to intensify repression. Trans people are the target, not the problem. The source begins with an important political detail. Trump has long targeted transgender people, and he faces blowback when he appears to wobble. That is not an incidental backdrop. It is the governing incentive structure. Anti-trans policy is being used as a loyalty signal, a mobilization tool, and a permission slip for state cruelty. The prisoners in this case are the ones paying a cost of that politics. They are being used to stage an ideological performance in which their bodies, housing, and mental health become proof of toughness for an administration that wants to look hostile enough to satisfy its base. The harm is not accidental. It is the point. Systemic error. This is what authoritarian governance looks like in a functioning legal system. Not the abolition of courts, but the exploitation of their limits. An administration issues a punitive order, a court blocks one path, bureaucrats find another, and the target absorbs the damage while lawyers argue over wording. The state then calls that law. If a prison system can respond to a court order by creating a harsher segregated unit and pretending that is obedience, the problem is larger than one judge, one prison, or one executive order. The problem is a political regime that treats trans lives as administratively disposable and treats legal restraint as an obstacle to route around. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article. With the automated voice of Clara, thanks for listening.